could help solve that challenge. And we started that. And then I went off to run a financial advisory firm, coached by one of my clients. And then I thought that still doesn't address all the challenge. How do you start when you don't have a massive amount of capital? And so I started a hub for startups, Impact Hub Lagos, with my partner, the late Balaji Finney, who was just amazing and was a serial entrepreneur. And for us, that helped to address some of the challenges as well. So you don't need a massive amount of capital. With 4,000 naira, you can walk in somewhere and have power and internet to do your work. Better still, you have a community of people who are trying to do the same thing that you're doing, as well as corporates who are interested, financiers who are interested, basically the entire ecosystem that you needed. And I thought that moved us along, another step further. But I guess that was not the end for me, because 1 year, one and a half years after that, I got sucked into government, and I go, okay, it's now time to fix the last piece. How do we connect to the government? And many of you are probably, I can see you're here, you're an NUTM, so you're probably interested in technology, probably interested in starting businesses. I'm probably not a big fan of the government. Am I right? It's okay. I look like government to you, but 2 years ago I was you. So just to put it in perspective, but we cannot move this country forward without engaging with that last piece. We can't. We will make policies that don't make sense and disrupt everything you've been planning. We will enable the wrong people who don't have the capacity or capabilities to do the things that you're doing. We will miss out on the innovation because we can't move as quickly as you can. And so we need each other. We need to work together. And really, for me, that is my purpose in office. It is to ensure that we are solving the challenges that we need to be solving. Nothing frustrates me more than wasting energy when I can just be sleeping or eating or just doing nothing, spending energy on things that don't matter. It has to be something that matters. And we have so many things that we see as problems. And yes, they are challenging, but for me, they are opportunities. The person who turned waste into a business. The person who, the Otumba Gaddafi, I don't want to say, but people who turn human waste into a business, plastic waste into a business, people who turn, just sunlight into a business, solar energy. People, you can transform pretty much anything, and the opportunities are there, and the imagination of Nigerians knows no bounds. You look at what we do across music, across the digital ecosystem, across everything, and we can solve every single challenge we have today once we're ready to pick it up. I trust Nigerians, they will solve any problem. And so for me, it has to be a challenge that makes sense. The other thing is the enablement piece. How do we solve that enablement piece? You need investment, and I'm sorry I keep saying you. The businesses that are going to solve these challenges need investment, and we need to solve that piece. And so for me, the governor is very clever. He never actually asked me anything. He just kind of asked me things. I'm like, oh, I think we need to solve this problem, financing, investment, attracting investment to Lagos. And the SDGs are so important. And you have to create jobs. And innovation, the tech sector is the way forward. So he gave me a job where I got to do everything. So that's really my job. My job is attracting investments to Lagos State, and not just foreign investment, but local investment. It's beginning to become the known wisdom now that no one is going to help you until you help yourself. We keep saying we want to attract foreign investment, but then they'll look, okay, there's money in Nigeria. Why isn't that money doing it? It must be because it's not a good idea. Because the people here understand, and if they don't believe that thing works, and so we should stop looking out for other people to be wayfinders. And that's why it's exciting for me to have this initiative startup. I've been a fan since I heard of it. In fact, I heard of it in the middle of the night, as I do. I sent him a presentation and he replied, we're in talks with them, we're meeting with them next week. And that's how we've got to get a NUTM, we've got to work with them in Lagos. This, in Africa, by Africans, for Africa, is the only way forward. So attracting investments, and for me, leveraging the SDG framework to do that. Because even when the governor was campaigning and then got elected, transition committee working together with everyone to design what we're going to do over the next 4 years, we developed a set of KPIs because he's private sector, public sector, everything sector development. He's done everything. So he came in from, and everyone knows he counts the days. He'll ask you, what day is this? We're today day 500. No, we're now 602. I think today is day 602. So so we have to count before any meeting. He counts in case he asks you. He's very focused. He's like, look, we don't have enough time to do anything we want, and so we have to be focused. So from the beginning, we had the measures we wanted. By the time we developed that framework around our themes agenda, it looked very curiously like another global framework, the SDG framework. So then I think he thought, why try to communicate this thing I'm doing when I can just align it to what they're doing? And when I say it, people, and especially global capital, aligns. And what he did by combining the SDG office with investment is now the approach that the Global World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies is finding a lot of investment promotion agencies are doing. So he was already ahead of the curve on that. And so we leverage the SDG framework to solve our challenges. And I encourage you to look at that and pick a worthy challenge. I think the last piece for me, so I've talked about investments, attracting investments, and starting here, solving the challenges, and again, using our own unique solutions to do that. And the third piece for me is partnership. As I said, we cannot do it by ourselves. In fact, if you look at it, we're really a drop in the bucket. Government spending this year, ambitious budget, is $3 billion, 1.1 trillion naira, $3 billion. The economy of Lagos is $150 billion. And all that is in businesses, is in human pockets, is in all the money that's moving around. Now, to achieve the SDGs, if we threw $100 billion at it every year, we still won't finish achieving it. So how far can the government take us? Not very far. But if we work together, if we come up with new business models, if we think about new ways of doing things, if we bring the innovation that we're capable of doing, we will get there. We will get there together and we will solve our challenges. So that for me is why I'm here. It's why I work in Lagos. It's my reason for breathing for the next 9 years until 2030. And I hope you join me on the journey. Thank you.
So before we move on to the scholars to ask any questions, do you have any questions for them? Please, go ahead.
I would really love to hear what your why is. So what's your why? What's the challenge? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be, don't worry, I'm not trying to be deep. I'm not deep. I'm not trying to be witty or clever. I really want to hear, maybe from a couple of people who are really moved by a challenge that they've tried every other way to solve, or think they have a super exciting way to solve it, and to really hear that. That for me is what I would love to hear from you today, just your inspiration. Thank you.
So who is the courageous person that would like to share their story, why they're here, and is confident to share it today? Someone?
I'm just going to end up picking on someone, so you might as well.
All right.
Good morning, sir and ma'am. Thank you for joining us. Well, I think for me, after spending 5 years in a Nigerian university, I realized that a lot of students graduate and they don't have nothing to show for it, just only maybe the first class degree. So I feel that the education sector in Nigeria, much emphasis placed on the education itself and not other skills you could learn. That's why you could ask a first class graduate to present his resume. I wonder, but your first class graduate, why's your resume looking like this? So I feel that there's a huge gap in the education sector that needs to be filled, and it's something I'm really passionate about, letting students before they graduate look job ready before graduation, which is one of the things that NUTM is also trying to put in us in terms of entrepreneurship skills, leadership skills, management skills. Some students are graduate, but they can't even manage whatever small thing you give to them. They don't even they didn't take part in leadership activities while they were in school. So I feel that more of this should be placed in the education sector before student graduate, which is one thing I'm very passionate about, which is why I'm here at NUTM to see how I can bridge that gap with one of the knowledge I'll gain here. Thank you.
What's your name?
Very gender.
Sorry? Yeah, thank you so much. Really great to host you, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Kendi Adibi. In 2017, when I was in my second year in the Lagos State University, I got exposed to the concept of the SDGs, that is the Sustainable Development Goals. They are promising, the 17 goals are so promising that, as she said, she can do anything, because I'm always saying it, that the ideas we've conceived, or that which will be conceived even after 2030, can be integrated to the SDGs. Very pivotal point. But unfortunately, I asked around my colleagues, none of them know the concept of the SDGs, even not the full meaning of the abbreviation. That was so painful. And I started that there's For us to bring innovations, there's a great deal of civic engagement that needs to be done. And that is my why. And all through my journey in the university, I started just 2 students starting SDGs Arts in campus, which I think you know him very well. And to see that by now we build, members across 7 universities, over 10,000 persons, and even at the international level, integrating persons to support the SDGs and innovative ideas coming on board. So Nigerians have skills. Unfortunately, the orientation needs to change. And if there's an alignment to the SDGs concepts, we can create change, and that's my point.
If it's okay, I'm going to pick on an international student because their way may be very different from someone. So Arinze, naturally.
So what's my why? So my name is Arinze Chimaruzo Chukwuka. My name is Arinze. So what inspires me? So I was born in Texas, raised in Texas. When I was 10, my parents sent me back home for boarding school. So I spent 3 years in Imo State, my dad's village. So it was an interesting transition to being in a village with like unreliable, electricity and no running water. But I always found solace farming with my grandfather, and we planted corn and cassava. And so he always had dreams of scaling his farm. Even he was like 70, but he always was talk about, he was going to grow farm and ship things out. And so we farmed, and whenever we harvested, we'll take it to the market. And the enthusiasm he had while farming, he didn't have in the market because it was an excess supply. You'll see rotten cassava supplies everywhere. But it was interesting to me how he still worked hard to pay for like the 8 kids he had, including my father. So whenever I went back to the US after JS3, I had this large passion for Africa, and I knew that there was some type of infrastructural and technology gap, also like in government as well. So I chose engineering to fill this gap. And then as I started learning more about industries and learning more about like the industrialization and manufacturing, I realized that this is how we can actually scale our agricultural industry. So I wanted to get into some type of processing company. So I ended up working, getting an internship with Shell in Texas in their refinery. And then I ended up deciding to work with ExxonMobil. I was there for 4 years in their chemical plants. And it was about 2 years ago when I asked the vice president, who was telling us their 30-year strategy about how they're going to expand their polymers business. And it was all in China. And so I was like, what about Africa? We have cheap labor, we have like raw materials, like that's actually where you guys get lots of oil from. And he just said there actually is no strategy for Africa, there's no market there. And so knowing that, I knew I had to start finding my own way. So I started attending like different business conferences, like the Harvard African Business Conference, the Warren African Business Conference, and things like that nature. And it's like, networking. And I came across an opportunity with build an ethanol plant here with cassava as a raw material. I found that quite ironic that that's what I planted growing up. So looking into the market and the global market for ethanol, I thought it was a pretty promising opportunity. So I started building a business plan January this year, built a team, 2 other folks. And when we started looking for an investor, the first question the person asked was like, who's on ground? So we looked at each other, it was like, so at some point in time, we all knew that some person had to be on ground. And so we started looking for opportunities. So like, hey, how can we get here like in a reliable, safe way? And then this program came up. One of my friends in Nigeria sent me this link. So now it was just deciding whether I was going to leave a very promising career to come to Nigeria to pursue a dream. And I think after the things that I experienced, and just my passion is always to provide socioeconomic prosperity for Africa, I knew that I wouldn't be happy working with a company that had no interest in Africa. So that's what ultimately led me to come here.
So I'm going to go to our Ghanaian neighbors. Let's find out why we leave, Ghana, that we want to come and study in Nigeria. My name is Aisha. So I've attended a lot of leadership programs, most of which ironically were organized by people from the US or like other countries. So for me to find something that's being organized by Africans, and for us, like, I mean, this is great. This is great. It's not a very common initiative that you find. The job I left before I came here was owned by Lebanese people. That job was stress because they would use you to the point where you can't even feel your legs or your arms anymore, but the payment was terrible. Like, they wouldn't even pay you because they're just using Africans. They feel like we don't have, I know how to put it, like we don't have brains to like implement these things for ourselves. So when they come here to put that in place, then they use you, you become their donkey. So for me, this is a narrative I want to change. I'm not sure I want to work for any other investor, especially not Lebanese. I'm partly Lebanese, but I really don't want to be associated with such things. So for me, entrepreneurship is a journey and NUTM is a start. Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Just one. In your journey here, in your journey of growth, whether it's starting a business, solving a problem, what do you think is the most important value for building a successful business or being a successful problem solver? What's the most important value that you think you need?
Good evening, sorry, afternoon. Okay, I'm Adibowale. So with the peculiarity of our environment, I'll say resilience is the answer.
Any other opinions? Good afternoon. My name is Elsie. I would say sustainability.
I think one of the biggest values will be empathy, just feeling for the people and what they're going through and just trying to solve it.
Lots of answers. Should I just let you screen it? Go ahead. What do you want to do?
Firstly, context, understanding the problem as it relates to where we are, our peculiarities here, a mix of the right people, like Bright said, and smarts here, and quite a number of other things, resilience as well, because yes, it's stressful here as well. So everything joined.
Okay.
Consistency.
Courage. And the reason why is I think that Nigeria itself puts you in a position where you're forced to think like you cannot do something. The risk, you're forced to step back and not take risks. And the kind of value for you to be able to, innovate in Nigeria and build something, you need the courage that David did not even have when he faced Goliath. The kind of courage that allows you to be able to, face in the face of when government is working, when businesses are not allowing you to, when we have like monopolies, like we have the Dangotes and the like, that don't allow small businesses to thrive. I think that kind of courage that allows you to start up and,
Thank you, Mr. Tukumbo. I think besides the having a reliable team, which is one of the things I think NUTM is actually doing to invest in people, right? There's something you said that I really resonate with, which is problem solution fit, and it's one of the key things you do, right? Being that you're able to find something that fits the market. With that, you're going to achieve the scalability that you want and touch lives. So that's.
Well, I'm the last one so that you can take a question. Sorry. Okay.
Good afternoon. I think for me, it is like we have to be daring. I mean, it was those who dared that gave us, they gave us cars, they gave us iPhones, and they gave us almost everything we have in life. You don't have to have the skills when you're starting, but daring enough is enough to like build momentum and attract all the resources that you need.
If it's okay, we'll take a few questions now. Do you have any questions for Tuboso? Sure, state your name and state who your question is for.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Gerald, and my question is for the special advisor on innovation and technology. Okay, quite frankly, I think a lot of us here love to be entrepreneurs, and I think the idea behind entrepreneurship is promoting investments, like you said, and creating opportunities. But to me, I believe that it is also important to provide a climate in which innovations and ideas can flourish. And that providing that climate largely has to do with the policies. So if you drag investors, it is the policies that make them stay. If you create opportunities, it is the policies you put in place that make those opportunities keep going. So what policies do your government have in place to make sure that the innovations that you are encouraging, or the ideas or the investments that you are proposing, stay and do not end? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll take a stab at that. Let me speak from the Lagos perspective, as Lagos is a subnational, right? And there are a lot of things that we can influence in Lagos, but there are a lot of things we can't, right? And so one of the things I've done this year is to engage with the federal authorities in looking at how we can come up with a startup act, right, that allows young businesses and young entrepreneurs such as yourself have the right conditions to be able to take your businesses through much less hurdles that you may have now, right? It's important that you understand that it's the central government must take a lead in some of these things so that you have policy consistency across state lines, right? So if you are trying to negotiate a supply chain in Kano, right, and Kaduna, there's policy consistency across board, right? So in Lagos State, we are looking at, as I said earlier, our Lagos State Science Research and Innovation Council is creating a funding cushion. In fact, last year, we started operations in January, and in the first 9 months, we gave about 110 million to entrepreneurs, about 20 startups or so. Yeah, about 20 startups innovating in the areas of COVID-19 research, agriculture, food security, manufacturing, and many other areas, right? So we are creating a funding cushion so that at least innovative, novel solutions in Lagos have that springboard to be able to launch into a much more mature place. But in terms of the actual policies, we are working with the federal government on the Startup Act, and of course, a lot of others, because we think we must be in line with the entire federation. And I think that's the only way it can work. So we will update you on how that is progressing. But I would encourage all of you, at least from the funding perspective, to take a look at our Innovation Council. And you have an idea, please apply. We'll be coming out with call-outs pretty shortly. We had about 2 or 3 call-outs last year, and those went successfully. We also funded companies in education as well. The lady that was speaking on education, especially for STEM education, science, technology, engineering, math, and companies that would at least innovate in the area of STEM education for kids. So that's a yes. Lagos State Employment Trust Fund. They also have a program called Lagos Innovates. It's divided into 2. So there's the Idea Hub that takes ideas that are probably not ready for prime time and pairs them with mentors, with people that are in the business community to kind of help shape their idea and make it into an actual viable business, right? And of course, the Lagos Innovates program also has loan programs and voucher programs as well, hub voucher programs. So as a young business, you need resources, you need electricity, you need internet, so they give startups vouchers to be able to use at any of these locations to be able to grow their business. So thereby reducing some of these initial costs for entrepreneurs. So those are some of the things we are doing to make it easier for startups. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Kemi. My question is for Mrs. Hammond. So it might seem a bit personal, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. I'm quite interested in governance, but at the same time, so I'll call it a fear of the way government is. Like you said, a lot of us don't like the government. I like the government, but I'm worried because there is the concept of personal values conflicting with suspected whatever in government. So my question to you is, have you ever had to deal with compromising situations where you have something in mind that you want to do, which is for the best of all, and then how do you balance it? How do you solve it? And how do you keep staying? Because I'm so sure that such things would have happened.
Thank you for that, Bacon. So I think there are challenges everywhere. So I remember when I worked in private sector and we were trying to get some technology work done, and they would tell you, oh, you can't do that at the banks. The heads of IT want to be the ones to supply the servers because they make money on the side. A lot of these challenges are everywhere. They're human challenges, they're not government challenges. And what we've done what it appears we've done in our environment is through a lot of missteps, I would say, over the years, things from, and you know, it's very ironic. Dr. Suleiman, who was the MD of Accenture, once said the problem of Nigeria is Nigerians are too nice. I mean, take the case of Evans, the kidnapper. When they started trying to prosecute him, what did Nigerians say? Leave him, a kidnapper. You know, so we are a very interesting bunch of people. The real challenge with Nigeria is what seems to be, maybe it's our niceness, an unwillingness to apply the consequences of a choice. And that's what seems to be rampant in our system. That's what allows people to, you know, sin first and ask for forgiveness later. That's our mantra, because we feel 9 times out of 10 you'll get away with it. Maybe one time they'll punish you, but most of the time you'll get away with it. So we keep doing that. There's no incentive to do anything the right way because you feel you can beg your way out of it. So it's an environmental challenge. It's not a government challenge per se. I mean, government, there are a lot of, this is a Pastor Tuboso. There are a lot of very upright people in government, and not just political people. There are a lot of upright people in the civil service. There are a lot of upright people in the leadership of agencies. There are a lot of upright people, and there are people who have done courageous things, bold things. I mean, Dr. Ezekwesili, Dr. Koje Wela, Governor El Rufai, in fact, Obasanjo, he reported his family. Say, hey, they've cornered this housing thing, fired the minister, and reallocated the houses. There are a lot of people who are brave or bold or people of integrity or stand by the right thing. And there are very, very, very many of us. So don't let the stories that you hear limit you. I have not in any way been forced to compromise on my values for 1 minute. I'm not saying you will not hear people attempt to say things. That happens every day. It happens in my church. It happens on the road. But you yourself will know who you are. And I think the first thing is knowing that I can walk away tomorrow. Tonight, now, I will just go like this with my phone. That's the only thing I really need. So it's not an issue. You have to decide who you are. And I can promise you, anywhere you are, once you make who you are clear, you will be fine. And I can tell you have absolutely nothing to fear, and I can boldly say that for Lagos State government. The challenges you will see are more things you have to be innovative around. It's more, and you know, again, bureaucracy sounds like such a nasty word, but it really is not. It's there for a reason. There's a reason why things are standardized. Lagos State has over 100,000 employees. You can imagine if everybody was allowed to be their own definition of innovative, what would happen? There's structure for a reason. After a while, the challenges structures sometimes don't change as quickly as they should, don't change in the way that they should. The ones that should change are not the ones that change, and so on and so forth. And it's our job to leave that legacy of pushing things just the right way and just adding on to what's gone before, not necessarily discarding all of history, but taking what's good about it and adding what's good about now and today and trying to just leave something better than you met it. For me, that's my motto. I may not be perfect, I may not do everything that I intend to do, or everything I could do, but I will leave this place better than I met it. And that's not just in terms of the work I will do, but it's in terms of the culture that I will leave behind and in terms of how I'll work with people. So I can assure you, do not be scared of government. You don't come in and then suddenly there's a black shadow that falls away and you become evil. I can tell you that. You will come, you will bring your authentic self to it, and you will make that place better than you met it.
Can I just piggyback off of that answer? You know, and this leads to the question I asked, that what is the most important value that would make you probably successful in business or take you through life generally? And I would tell you that the most important thing that we need today in Nigeria are values, right? You can learn skills, you can learn, you know, the most complex mathematical equations, discrete algorithms to take a rocket ship to space. But values are extremely, extremely important. And that is what will take you through whether it's enterprise, whether it's government. Like she said, there are very many upstanding people in government. 100,000 people, and they are citizens just like you. But the difference between one of them and the next is the value they exhibit in their workplace. And that is what will set you apart in the long run. I mean, some people that do not have values, yes, they might get to where they are going faster, but they won't stay there long, right? And so to the test of time, your values, extremely important, extremely important. That's really what's going to take you to where you need to go. So don't be afraid of Lagos State. There are people that are doing their work every day, doing the right things every single day. It's not one huge monolith. And like we said, 80% of the economy of Lagos State is the private sector. The only reason that you see government is because that's where the torch is really shown the brightest. If you take a torch and put it on the other 80%, you'll be shocked at what you will find. So please engage with us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Vincent. My question goes to both Mr. Tokumbo and Mrs. Hamad.
It's too much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So over the years, I've been able to establish a fact in the sense that we all know as education is an SDG multiplier, right? If education is given properly, it multiplies every other thing we want to do. So, but over the years, we have seen a rise in private institutions in education. So now we know from 2010 to this very moment, there has been a bit of transformation in the education system, whereby when I wrote WAEC, the courses I took are no longer in existence or have been modified into something else right now. And we see things like home economics and other courses coming up because they saw a reason not just for theory teaching, but also for practicalization for whatever is being taught in schools, right? But now, based on what is going on, based on the population we have, we know majority of people, especially children in the secondary school level, have more access to government secondary schools than private secondary schools. So all we have been talking about is coming up with new ideas, but what structure has been put on ground to maintain these government facilities, to make sure that these ideas that have been put together over the years are being implemented properly? That is my first question. And the second one is, as an SDG person, we know there has been a lot of donation in the area of education. So is there any structure on ground to monitor implementation of these projects? And if these projects are being monitored, is there like a guideline to show that whatever idea is being implemented is of the topmost quality as at what we actually need in Nigeria? Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's very interesting. I'm sure you know, since you're an SDG person, today is actually the International Day for Education. So my first 10 o'clock this morning, I already had a very exciting conversation with UNESCO, the UN Information Center, and NUTM, an NGO that works in that space. And we talked a little bit about some of these issues that you brought up. So from an education perspective, and I guess that's your area of leaning, yes, it's true that there's been a massive rise in the number of private sector education institutions, particularly in Lagos, even I think in the tertiary space, largely outside Lagos, but in primary schools for sure, largely in Lagos. And I'd like to actually boast that Lagos has proven the model on the opportunities to commercialize almost everything that matters that's the basic need for life, from housing to education to power, to all the things that we need to survive. And it's proven that case in a way that makes it sustainable and therefore allows us to be able to offer much more than the government can do. There are a lot of private schools. There's estimated of 18,000 private primary schools in Lagos. Even though those 18,000 private primary schools, a lot of them are low income, and only about 50% of the students in Lagos are actually in those schools. The rest are actually in the 1,018 public sector primary schools. And then we have about 657, I think, 637 junior secondary schools and 620 senior secondary schools, something like that. The majority of children in secondary school are actually in public secondary schools. So the case seems to be more around the private schools. But for us, when we think about what needs to happen from an education perspective, we're thinking about both public sector and private low income as well. We're looking at the entire spectrum because you find the public schools are actually better than the private low income schools. So we can't just look at public only and say, oh, let's leave private to themselves. The high income ones, yes. The Coronas, the St. Saviours, the CISs, yes. But you do need to support the private low income as well. Because very often they're filling a gap. In some areas, there's no public-private school nearby within walking distance for some students. And that's why there's a proliferation of the private schools. So there's a lot of effort to, one, improve the quality of the education access, to build infrastructure, three, improve on teacher quality. So for a few years, we found Lagos wasn't even recruiting new teachers. So teachers retire and new teachers are brought in. So the student-teacher ratio goes up. So Lagos recruited about 4,000, 5,000 teachers. I can't remember if it was 4,000 in primary and then 3,000 in secondary or 4,000 in total, but about 4,500 teachers were recruited last year and we're all trained. And so there's a lot of elements to work on, and we're working on it as a state. One of the things that we've done, as you mentioned, is, and I think you were asking about investment. So the short answer is Lagos is investing. We know that, as you say, education is the key. When the people are educated, a lot of the other problems go away. So girl-child absence in school, plus unsustainable number of children in families, plus low income for women, all that is addressed when the girl goes to school. She will marry later, she will have fewer children, she'll be able to take care of herself and her family. So there's so many things. Health challenges are resolved. She will not have VVF because she does not have a child at 14. So a lot of challenges are resolved by education. People are able to solve our problems better. They have skills, so they're employable. So they can earn higher income. They can go anywhere they want and still be considered. They can live the quality of life that they want. They know how to manage their money and invest and plan for a better life. These things are fundamental. So, okay, so I know I talk quite a bit, so we don't want to lecture here today. So the short answer is it's important to invest in education. I think education is the second largest budgetary provision for this year. The Ministry of Education will be given 161 billion naira this year. That's more than a tenth of the budget. It's about 14–15% of the budget is going to the Ministry of Education. And then many other education initiatives twice the national average, by the way. And there's many other things that are happening around education that are not termed education. So that's just to show you where we place education in Lagos State. With regards to how is monitoring done, transparency is one of the accusations that you hear. Lots of people don't really know what the government is doing. And that's part of why we encourage you to get close. So how many people know that you can see the audited accounts of Lagos State online? It's there. The budget is there. The accounts are there, audited accounts. In fact, PPA published a report on the contracts that are allocated. So for those who are doing inspector gadgets, they want to know everything is public. You can see, but we don't know. So we just say, oh, we don't know what they're doing. It's right there. So if people ask and then you say like, oh, I didn't know. It's right there. It's your right to know what your money is being spent on. Two, I don't know how many people know that there are budget consultation forums that happen in every district in Lagos. Before the budget is done, any Lagosian or anybody can come and say, we think you should do this, we think we should do this, and all that is put together as part of what the budget is. And the House of Assembly does a similar process. So there are many ways for us to get involved and to also see what's being done. But it's just the challenge is we don't know. But the closer you are with government, the more you will know these things. And that's why I always say to Nigerians, if you want to fix Nigeria, know what the government is doing. Get close, understand what they're doing. When you start asking people questions, they cannot wiggle and dodge and hide. Whatever they're not doing that they should be doing, they will start to do. But let me now pitch for myself. One of the things that we do at my office, and I talked about partnerships being so important, we've created something called the Lagos State Volunteer Corps to address this same problem. People just don't really know how to engage with government, and they don't know how to trust what government is doing. And so for us, we know we need a partnership to address the SDGs. So what we've done is we've created this to address the SDGs. It's a platform for anybody to co-create with us, to volunteer for our projects. Let's create programs together. We have a company, a paint company that has stepped up, and for them, their COVID response was they want to paint, they want to lift gloom with color. They want to paint schools. So we asked them, will you train Lagosians to be painters? Because they have a paint academy. And they said, sure. Oh, and will you work with artists? Because our artists aren't really doing much. Let them create murals. And they said, sure. So we're doing this whole thing around that. We're going to be painting schools. They're doing 40 schools to start with. You can imagine how much savings. They're helping us paint 40 schools for free. They'll train out of work painters and work with artists. It's a beautiful union. Rekit Benkesa gave us soap and worked with us on our hand washing campaigns for 65,000 units last year. So we're creating partnerships like that. We have companies that have supported our 1 million device drive to put tablets in the hands of students. And so there are a lot of partnerships. And that's a very open, transparent way because everybody will see what is happening and know what the initiatives are that we're doing. So I really hope I've addressed your question. But if you have any other questions, go to lsvc.ng. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much. My name is Femi. So my question, I think any one of you can answer it. So two questions that I have. The first one, I think that you articulated well enough the reason why private sector needs to be very involved, because the entire economy, for the most part, is run by the private sector. But the challenge is, what I've seen is that the private sector have to be the one to push the government to lobby for policies, for instance, to ask for, some laws to be made, some regulations to be made. So what is Lagos State government's current architecture to pull in, private partnership? And how can, private sector begin to, before they find the need themselves to start to, ask for policies, what is your own, structure to accommodate that, private partnership? That is one. Then the second question is around the key areas of focus for Lagos State, because we also last year or 2 years ago what happened with GoCada and Max.ng. Now, this is not to whine about anything. We understand that Lagos State government will have its own priorities, but before we start to build businesses, before we start to innovate in areas that will then come and then meet the wrong kind of policy, what are the areas of focus and why are those areas very important for Lagos State government?
Oh, sorry, we're both very happy you asked, thank you. With the second question, let me start with the first. That's actually one of the reasons why our office exists. So part of our function is to be a policy ombudsman. It's to make sure that companies that are coming in know about what the government is doing, understand the policy environment, and also ensure that they have a champion that can take back things that are not working to the government and try and find a resolution. And so we do that typically by working with the organized private sector. So we work through the associations like MAN and NECA and NASIMA, and we interface with them and their members because, so MAN has 26 million companies in Lagos alone that are registered to it, NECA and NASIMA. So we work with them to hear what the customers are complaining, what their members are complaining about. We actually hold a corporate assembly every year, which is a forum to show what we're doing to support the private sector and then hear back from the private sector. But one of the things we're going to do this year is an investors forum, and we will have it at least twice this year, aiming to maybe move that to quarterly, which would then also showcase the investment opportunities in Lagos, and for us, not just for the state, but in businesses in Lagos as well. Because when business prospers, Lagos prospers. So we showcase businesses that require investment, as well as the investment opportunities within the state as well. And also use that as a forum to hear back from the private sector. We're also going to be implementing an investment barometer to sort of understand what the challenges are that investors are going through and the things that we need to fix. So there are some initiatives that are coming up to improve this conversation because we realize that we're just not talking. We're not talking, and it's when you talk and you have a dialogue that you understand what the challenges are. But to respond to the to the e-hailing restrictions that really caused an uproar in the startup ecosystem last year. The honest truth is, first of all, this was really a reinforcement of an existing law that was passed in 2012 for a very good reason. Lagos saw that there was a high level of insecurity, there was a high level of recklessness that was happening, especially in the central city where people are really trying to rush and where the traffic really is very high, and so they're going one way. The number of people that were ending up in public hospitals, we don't even have the record of private, and dying was 26 every month. When those restrictions were made, and they were not bans, the restrictions from roads and highways and bridges and the central business district, but of the 57 local government LCDAs, local CDAs and LGs, they're restricted in 35. They're free to operate in 22, including Alimosho, the largest LCDA, Ekwe, and all the outskirt areas. All those areas are actually difficult to have a last mile connection. They're actually allowed to operate there. And that's been the law since 2012. Now, I know Max very well. How do I know Max? Because Tayo was also one of our co-founders when we started Impact Hub. And the reason he didn't push through was Max raised the first $5 million. So Max is a family company to me. And so it's, again, as Tuposa made the point, we are all here, we live here, we're Lagos residents. So we're part of this ecosystem. We're not sitting somewhere in space, then just looking, how can we mess with everybody? We're actually part of the ecosystem. I know that none of the companies, there were three main companies, and none of them had licenses for passenger operations. What they saw was a reduction in the enforcement. All of them really came for the logistics play, which they're still very free to do today. But they saw a gap in the passenger issue, and they took advantage, and the government didn't do anything for some time. Now, when Governor Sanwo-Olu came in 2019, one of the first things that he did was to meet with them. And he met with those companies at least 3 or 4 times. In fact, our first strategy was to work with them to sanitize the space. There are about, each of them, I think the largest of them had maybe 1,000 bikes, so about 3,000 bikes between the 3 main companies, Gokada, Max, and OK. They had about 3,000, but there are about 700,000 riders on bikes. And we started this conversation, it was even presented at Expo several times. We actually spent every week or every other week at least an hour, 2 hours talking about this issue because the insecurity and the recklessness was a challenge we had to solve. So the first attempt was, let's use them to organize the system. But unfortunately, the majority of them, the largest, couldn't even organize themselves. We have pictures, we'll show you roads where they are parked, and they themselves are constituting a nuisance. So if they can't control 3,000, there's no way they're going to control 7,000. What do we do when some of the others say, okay, wait till we have formed the company? So we tried to look at ways that it could work. And at that scale, it didn't look like it could work. And so what we said was, let's enforce the restrictions. Let us organize them, still the same play. Let's organize them in the areas that are unrestricted. there's still more than 50% of this business left. Let's organize you and see that work. If that works, we can then reallow you to come back into the central areas. And that's really where the conversation was. And all those companies, including their ride-hailing associations, were carried along in that conversation every single step of the way until the announcement was made that we will be reinforcing these laws, especially because we then started seeing towards late 2019 a massive incursion into Lagos. You would see trucks piled high, 98 people, 27 bikes. It was just becoming unstable. And we all saw the impact from a security perspective. And I ask you, what would COVID have looked like if Okada business was still working March and April of last year? We wouldn't have been talking about the numbers we're talking about. So it's not an attempt there was no sudden policy shift or flip-flop. It was actually an existing policy, and they because none of them had a license, and the conversation was ongoing, and they knew. It was, and if anything, for me, it was an inability to change an existing policy, but then we are still in conversations with them. We're still working with quite a few of them to create last mile solutions. We're very interested in ensuring that those businesses grow and are successful, but it cannot be at the risk of lives and property and security. So Lagos continues to remain in conversation. I still had a talk with Tayo yesterday, and we're still very interested in ensuring that that sector is organized in those areas, as we mentioned, paint them different colors, restrict them, put speed delimiters, do everything that we can to sanitize that clay. If we can then do that in the more remote areas where they actually have been proven empirically to be less disruptive, we can see how we can, if there's a case to move them back into the larger city. I don't think there will be, but I can assure you that's not a policy flip-flop. So I just wanted to explain that. I think Tubasu will also talk a little bit about his efforts in supporting that conversation and working with the companies, because I know he did quite a bit as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think to answer your first question, one of the things I'm trying to do is really to get even the ecosystem more in talks with the legislative, right? Because in every country in the world, the private sector does drive legislation. If you look at the US, for instance, you have armies of lobbyists in the Congress, right? That practically sometimes even write laws for congressmen to pass that favor whether it's particular industries, subsidies, and all of that. The energy efficiency subsidies that the US government gave to alternative energy companies came from the alternative energy ecosystem, right? Lobbying the government on behalf of green energy, and all of that. So there needs to be a stronger link between this ecosystem and the legislative arm. We are the executive, right? So we enforce the laws that are currently passed by the legislative. So for a really robust policy drive, right, that would benefit Lagos State, the ecosystem, innovation, tech, the industry itself, the people on the ground need to engage with the legislative. But we are trying to reduce that gap. The second question on the Okada, the e-hailing, we were in conversations multiple times. And there were even issues with the private sector guys themselves. One of the things we're trying to use them for was to identify, okay, who are the people in this industry, right? Who are the drivers, right? Some of the e-hailing companies said they could give us information on drivers and passengers. So we have a data bank of what is going on in the sector. But apparently, even one of the largest ones, to our knowledge, a lot of the drivers were not even, you take your phone, you click on the app, you order a bike. But it started happening that a considerable amount of that interaction was not even happening on the app anymore. So passengers would just flag down Go-Kada there's no data, right? So if you can't enforce that at a minimal scale, how would you enforce that when it's 10,000 riders? So there were multiple issues. that were still going on. And of course, there's also the issue of the other side of the conversation. The unlicensed, unregistered Okadas were much more than the private e-hailing companies. So it was now an issue of favoritism. Oh, you guys are favoring these people. Is it because they have money? How about us? We are poorer and all that. So, you know, the government is a government for everybody, right? We must not be seen favoring one sector over the other. So there were multiple issues. And like she said, we are still in conversations. We are still trying to see, okay, what are the more pragmatic steps that we can take to really, enforce the laws and really sanitize the industry. And like she said, it was an existing law that pushed some of the e-hailings outside the major city because it was a ban on the major highways, right? And not even everywhere, right? The major highways, which according to our data, had a 70% higher chance of accidents than when on a smaller road. Another issue that was going on at that time was the environmental issues, right? When some of these bikes reach the end of life, where do they get disposed? It was causing a major environmental headache because there are no carbon taxes, there are no mandates on the companies to properly get rid of the bikes when they reach the end of term. They just leave it. It's a problem for government. That costs money. That harms your environment, right? And we needed to take a look at that as well. So it's a complex problem. So that was why we were saying, look, it's better we engage properly on all these issues so that we form the solutions together. So, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much for, I just wanted to, emphasize that. What are the areas of focus for Lagos State government now, so that we can tie into that directly without having to,
So this question is related, and unfortunately, this will be our last question. But when we do that,
Okay, so my question is very related to this, and I think you've spoken to most of it, because when FaceTac was acquired last year by Stripe, there were mixed reactions from different corners. Some of them said they exited too early, that they had the potential of becoming a unicorn and things like that. But some of the concerns that people also said is that, okay, you want Lagos State government to wake up one day and still bring out another policy that will send them out of the market. So I think the government needs to create more synergy and discussion with private sector. I work with a lot of startups. I help with market research, business planning, financial. So most of the concern, is government policy when we do risk mitigation analysis for them. And so the uncertainty of administrations another administration can come tomorrow, and just come up with policies that will affect these startups. So I think there should be more, like Femi said, more synergy and discussion.
Excellent. And thank you very much for that. Even though I'm surprised you would say it's Lagos you think will wake up and disenable. Lagos has been the greatest supporter of the startup ecosystem. And I think it should be. So, the irony of it is I always smile when I hear, we did this in spite of government. We did this in spite of government. Because I know what so many of those companies are coming to, how the government is enabling those companies, right down to the beginning of that Yaba Square Mile. You realize that fiber project, so I'll let him tell the story, was actually supported by the government. Government has been, the Lagos State government has been at the forefront of almost everything that's required by the ecosystem to grow. It's like musicians telling the government that the government did not support them. Is it true? Who funds all the things that they're doing? I think it's important that we also are a little bit fair and we recognize what support has been given. Without a doubt, the government is very far from perfect. Otherwise, I would not be in there. It's very far from perfect. But the government really is all of us. All the results of our governance is all of us. It's what comes out when we engage. And as Tubosun has said, we need to engage more. And when you talk about protecting, I think Tubosun's point is very, very apt. we really should be engaging more with the legislators. You see, a governor can come and change something he doesn't like if it's a policy or if it's an initiative of someone else. But it's far harder to do it when it's enshrined in law. So let's make sure all the things that are important to us are enshrined in law. You know, I've been saying to the hardware ecosystem for a while, let's come together and work on an industrial plan. Software ecosystem, send us a white paper as tools. So that's how governments do things. Is it me or President Buhari that is supposed to wake up and know that hydrogen is the next big thing and we should invest in it and how to do AI? And we will write those policies. We cannot, but the specialists can. They know what's going on, they know what they're working on, and they're the ones who should be telling Nigeria how we should be protecting data, what we should be doing around AI, what we should be doing for machine learning, what we should be doing in every sector to protect ourselves, how to better protect our resources that are being stripped in Africa every day, how to position Nigeria better for the Africa Continental Free Trade Zone that's coming up, what industries we should protect, what we should do, how to support entrepreneurs better. It has to come from us because we know the answer. So there's no point sitting on the answer and waiting for somebody else to get it. You know the answer, just tell them. And tell them and tell them and tell them and tell her and tell her and tell her until they get it. So that's really what our role is. For me, with regards to your question around the areas of interest, our themes agenda, traffic and transport management, and what are we looking to do? Multimodal transportation. We want to create essentially a functioning unified system of public transport, reduce the number of cars on the road. That's what really people who live in cities ultimately dream of. So public transport that works, I should be able to get in a bus that's nice and comfortable and air conditioned or whatever it is and get to work, get into the boat, get onto the rail and use my single ticket to do everything. And that's what Lagos is trying to build. Water transportation for me is the area that requires investment. There are a lot of challenges to crack there, including the fact that traffic comes one way in the morning, everybody comes central and everybody goes back. So we need to fix that as well. But that's a key area. And we're doing a last mile plan around buses. So that's an area. The next is health and environment. So our primary healthcare centers, getting health insurance going, you know, with health manufacturing, we were just looking at that today. We don't make gloves. We now make masks because of COVID. We don't make gowns. We don't make anything. We don't make injections. We don't make syringes. We don't make needles. We don't make anything. And as you said, Arenze said, plastics and polymers. Why can't we make injections? You know, there's so many things that we can do. We don't make drugs. We produce some generics, but we haven't innovated anything. We are sitting on a gold mine of COVID health, and we're not doing anything with it. You know, so healthcare, huge. Environment, waste, plastic waste. Organic waste. Lagos generates estimated 11,000 to 13,000 tons of waste a day, of which 40% is organic waste. Who's looking at how to turn that into cosmetics and turn that into apple cider vinegar that you're all buying at plenty money? Who's looking at how to transform that? You know, leather, all sorts of things. So the environment, let's turn waste into money, circular economy. Education and technology, we've just talked about. I mean, I don't need to tell you about technology being money. Please just turn it into money. That's the end. Education is huge as well. I just talked about it being commercialized, but ed tech is huge. We have new challenges now. We cannot continue with education as it is. So who's going to be our U lesson here in Lagos? Who's going to take things beyond? Who's going to start making tablets for education and laptops and stuff for people to learn? Who's going to revise the curriculum? Who's going to bring, you know, new learnings, new things to us in Lagos? Who's going to engage early years development? We don't really have a solution at that level for the masses. So lots of stuff to do in education. Making Lagos a 21st century economy, that's housing. I actually personally want to do a housing challenge every year so we can innovate the cost of a house, reasonable 1-2 bedroom house down to $1,000. You know, I said it once and an architect laughed, and after laughing for about 25 minutes, he said, okay, a standard house, 2-bedroom has 6 doors minimum. 1 door is X. Your door is already more than the cost of the house you're trying to do. Okay, so can we do cheaper doors? Can we use bamboo to do that? What do we do about windows? How do we cool the house? How do we innovate around our challenges instead of just buying everything that is made out there? And then the cost of the components is more than what we can afford. How do we make our houses greener? So how do we fix the housing issue? Agriculture, how do we feed ourselves? If we had remained locked down for 2 more weeks, we'd have had unrest in this state. We would have run out of food. Even during the NSAS protest, the blockades, food was rotting away on the highway. We would have run out of food. So how do we get self-sufficient in a tiny area state? As Mr. Governor always tells, 0.4% of the landmass of this country with 12% of the population on it, incredibly dense and no agriculture. How do we feed ourselves? And 30% of it water. So how do we do it? How do we build up to feed ourselves? How do we increase yields? That's a massive, massive area. And they're talking so much about agriculture, and Rita's talking about agricultural processing, and how are we doing that in Lagos? Lagos, as commercially viable as it is, we export almost nothing out of Lagos. We can export even common jute. You can turn it into so many things. You can turn almost anything. Most products you look, you find 4 or 5 byproducts. Traditional, things that we know about our food. Cassava, so many things. What are we doing with those things and exporting? My husband runs a palm oil plantation. Companies pay him 9 months in advance. He sold his market for the year. Somebody called me and said, yes, I heard that, he does only forwards, but can you help me get a location? I'm now important because we import 55% of the palm oil that we consume in this country. So how are we changing all those narratives? So commerce, how are we making commercial spaces better? Like what Landmark is trying to do? How are we developing our real estate so that it has value? So we build better places for us to live. Entertainment and tourism, no need to even talk there. Can we please just overtake Hollywood very, very quickly? In fact, I had an idea for a TV show today. I'm going to talk to somebody. Let's just, that for me, every time, for me, I didn't really get it until like maybe 2002. And you go to Dubai and they're like, oh, do you have Nigerian films? You go to Hawaii, oh, do you have Nigerian films? This market is big. All the Black people around the world are looking to us. And that is a 2-3 billion person market. Security and governance. So that's less an investment opportunity, but what we're doing, so that's more for us to fix and make sure that everything works. But at least those first 5 are investment opportunities for you. So take your pick. We're happy to have you support us on any of those things that I've talked about. Thanks.
So just to round up with this, if you do have innovative solutions in any of these areas that are ready, prime time, that this is something that would solve. You've sorted out your investment. You have your investors all lined up. Your product is viable or your service is viable. You've done a market validation. Everything is in place. So you go to lagossolutionshub.com, right, and submit a proposal that says, look, this is what this will do for Lagos. This is the business case. This is what we've achieved so far over 9 months of validation, 10 months, 12 months, whatever, right? That's for solutions that are prime time, that are ready. Now, for solutions that perhaps are still at MVP stage, or that this is an idea that has a lot of momentum, you've not yet sorted out your investors, you're still at an early funding stage, the Lagos State Science Research and Innovation Council would probably want to hear about it. But I tell you, it must be unique, it must be solving a problem, right? And it must be extremely scalable, very, very scalable. So you go to lasric.lagosstate.gov.ng, right? Follow us, get to know about what we are doing in science research and innovation. And one more question. What area are you from? Sorry, your name?
Real one.
Real one. Are you from Lagos?
I'm from Kwara, but
you live in Lagos. What area?
Surulere.
Surulere. Who's your representative?
Honorable Desmond Elliott. Yes.
Because it's from Nollywood. Okay, so please get to know your representatives, right? Whether you're in Lagos Island, Alimosho, write them. Tell them, this is what I think. Tell them to invite you to a reading in the house. Engage with them. Let me tell you, they are the ones that can change your future, right? You can make them write the laws that would lift this country up. You can begin to tell them about whether it's ideas of restructuring or ideas on patent law, intellectual property, all of the above. Know your representative. Thank you.
To round up to this conversation, I'm going to indulgence to collect my questions, all the ones that have been asked today. I will collect it and send it to you, and hopefully you can respond to some answers. So please, scholars, another round of applause for. So thank you very much. So scholars,
I don't know what I'm doing.